Indifference is a killer to motivation and just literally just a vibe killer too. I'm just amazed at the fact that we have let social media and just this exposure to literally everything you can imagine dictate how we feel constantly. And I'm not just talking about anger and not just talking about like the way we respond to people. I'm simply talking about the fact because of this exposure to everything, we become numb to everything. The way we react is just becoming this indifferent person towards every single situation. And I think that's just depressing and sad because we're not created to be indifferent towards everything in life.
And who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Welcome back to the Winter Arc Podcast. Today is September 16th, and this is journal entry number 13. I wanted to talk a little bit about indifference because honestly, indifference is one of those things that has always bothered me, just in general of like my own attitude of indifference towards just everything in life sometimes, because of just feeling like that's normal to act like and normal to take part in, because of just our exposure and numbness to social media and just exposure and numbness to just everything in life. But also just the fact that how when I'm treated with indifference by others, it makes me realize and it makes me finally just come to terms with the fact that my own indifference towards myself and towards life is just as bad. For instance, the main reason I wanted to talk about this was just because I try to get ideas and I try to get people's opinions because I honestly just value input overall. I'm that type of person. I just value input to really make sure an idea I'm thinking about or something I want to build or something I want to start doing is a good idea and etc. Right? But the problem is that I often come across this problem because the way I process things, I talk a lot. And some people get annoyed with that. And that's, I guess that's fine and okay. But long story short, it honestly just hurts when people are very indifferent towards something I may talk about or just indifferent to an idea that I'm trying to work out while I'm talking and stuff like that. And, I'm not blaming anyone in my life for this. And if you're listening to this podcast, it's definitely not you. These are just external people who are, a part of my life, but not really. But the whole point is that this made me really think about indifference and about the fact that it's honestly just a motivational killer. It's a vibe killer and just makes you feel, in a sense, that your input or your idea or you in general aren't worth it per se. And, I'm not having an identity crisis because of whatever someone said. No one said anything. That's the funny thing. No one said anything. That's indifference. But I guess it's just the fact that it gave me a realization of the fact that we often do this to ourselves too. We act very indifferent towards ourselves, towards life, and just towards the exposure we see every single day on social media. We see something terrible happen on our phones, on our screens almost every single day at some point of the day, and we just shrug it off. We're just like, oh, But it's just the fact that we were never designed or created to see violence. We were never created or designed to see terrible things. And what happens though is that when we're exposed to all these different things on social media every single day of our lives, we begin to be very numb to it. And that honestly leads becoming numb in our relationships. It leads to becoming numb literally in every single interaction that we can have with people, because sometimes we just don't care. We don't give the time of day in a conversation. We might be there physically, but we're not there mentally. And that's what indifference is. And that's what I've struggled with myself in terms of, no, not only have I been indifferent to God and friends and family, but I've been indifferent to just people who really need my input or whatever. But it gave me the realization that even I have indifference when I was talking to someone recently and they were just very indifferent to what I was trying to talk to them about. And it wasn't really anything important. I just wanted their input. I just wanted their thoughts on a certain idea and project that I was doing. But long story short, because of that interaction, it really made me think about the fact of that because of that indifference, and granted, it wasn't hate, it wasn't love, it wasn't anything, it wasn't any emotion, it was just indifference. Because of that indifference, it kind of made me feel unmotivated to keep doing the thing that I was talking about or keep like pursuing the idea that I was thinking about and trying to get their input on. And I realized that that's what we do in our everyday lives towards God and towards just life in general. And the thing that I really want to stress is this. Indifference is oftentimes, at least for me, and the way I work, the way I function, the way I communicate with others, indifference is often worse than hate, at least to me. Just because I would rather you be angry or hateful or say something mean to me than be indifferent to me and not care whatsoever. But that's just me. I don't know if anyone else is kind of similar in that. And I think that if we're all honest, we just do it to a lot of people all the time without even thinking about it, because our mind and our focus isn't really in the conversation. I mean, there's been so many different times when I have, just kind of like stared into space as my wife is talking to me. And it's not because I don't love her. It's that I've become indifferent to the conversation. And I'm just kind of like spacing out. And I think, and listen, there's different reasons why people can be spaced out. Like some days I'm just tired. That's normal. But some days maybe I'm just being selfish in the moment, and maybe I'm just thinking about something else that I think is more important than what my wife is trying to tell me. But I think that we need to be conscious of the fact our indifference affects people more than we know, because they can tell when we're not being real with them. But I think if we were honest, we would realize that we are even indifference towards God. And we kind of wonder, why do I struggle so hard with not reading the Bible daily? Why don't I do devotions? Why don't I pray more? Blah, 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 blah. It's because we're not intentional. And that goes the same thing with our conversations, our relationships, and every single situation that we find ourselves in when we're connecting with a human being. And so I think that even too, like back to the example I was sharing earlier about like the moment I realized how damaging, honestly, indifference is to just motivation and just productivity, is the fact that like because of their indifference, I wasn't able to really like get excited about the idea that I was trying to get an opinion on. And the one thing you have to understand too, though, is that, and this is going back to the idea of how we should approach indifference when we are trying to stay motivated and trying to stay productive, even when people are indifferent to us, is the fact that we have the choice of either taking their indifference personal and just like feeling really unmotivated to complete the idea or project or whatever we're doing in the moment, or we have the choice of really just encouraging ourselves and realizing, you know what, not everyone and not even this person understands my vision, understands like my ideas, understands where I'm trying to come from. And it's okay for people to be indifferent in general, but I do think that it is a warning sign of the fact that maybe that person is just not a good person to go to for ideas or for a person to confide in. And so this is something that you just have to think about when you're talking to people, when you're trying to get people's opinions, and when you're trying to think about different ideas for what you're trying to build, whether it be a brand, whether it be a company, whether it be making YouTube videos, or whether it just be creating in general. Find people who get excited about what you do. Like, don't drag yourself down with people who don't care. Oftentimes, we just let indifference into our lives, and we just often just use it as a way to make excuses for the things that we're supposed to do in life. Because everyone else is doing it, so why not me, right? But the thing is that I really believe that God calls us to be separate. We're not supposed to be indifferent. We're supposed to love. We're supposed to have a life filled with purpose. We're not these static people. We're not these static things that just walk around all day like robots. We're not supposed to be numb. And it's something that, sadly, social media and the exposure to literally everything and all of creation and everything that's bad. And it's an aspect of social media that's just so damaging and just so negative because it affects our attitudes every single day. Even if we are generally like joyful or happy or something, it still affects us. Like we literally see something terrible happen on our screens, on our little screens on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, every single day. And that, even if it doesn't affect us in the moment, but those things you see that causes numbness to everything and causes numbness to our moral character, it changes you over time. And I think that this is why it's important to consider like, okay, why do I need social media? I've went on so many different kinds of social media breaks, and it's just every time when I do, I just feel so much more peaceful. I actually feel emotions that I'm supposed to feel because social media honestly just makes me numb to the emotions that I would otherwise feel. Because those emotions that are blocked by numbness, it's just like a continuation of just exposure to literally everything that we're not supposed to constantly consume. Hope you guys kind of enjoyed or kind of learned or kind of got something from this. I don't know if you got anything from this, but I hope to see you, or you will rather hear me, tomorrow.